Welcome to the Talent Development Think Tank podcast. I am your host, Andy Storch, and I am excited that you're joining me today for another great interview and conversation to help you up your game and improve your capabilities and success in the world of talent development. That is what we are all about. And I've got a great one for you today, all about becoming a learning leader. My guest today is Damon Lembi, who is the CEO of LearnIt, a global leader in corporate training solutions that has upskilled more than 1.8 million professionals in the past 27 years. He is also the author of the new book, The LearnItall Leader, about mindset, traits, and tools. And Damon lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with his wife, 2 kids, and a puggle named Pablo.
That's
Damon,
right.
welcome to the show.
Andy, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
I'm excited to have you. As we were just talking before we started recording, I've been reading through your book, and so much of it resonates with me, from the growing up and playing baseball to all the concepts about what it takes to be a great leader today and the importance of humility and curiosity and learning. And we're going to get into all of that. And as much as I want to talk about Pablo the Puggle, I do want to get into more concepts from your book. But I want to start with some of your background, because this all starts, and your book starts with stories from you coming up playing baseball, and not just little league baseball like me, but you actually played big time college baseball and were drafted into the major leagues. So how does that set the basis for what we're talking about with this book and the work you do today?
Well, thank you, Andy. It has a lot to do with it. So I basically grew up playing baseball through all sports through high school. And I was fortunate my senior year to be drafted by the Atlanta Braves in the 13th round. And that's when I first had my first really difficult decision. Should I take the journey and go play minor league baseball, or move on to college? And my parents were great. They gave me the opportunity to make whatever decision I wanted, and I went with college. And I chose Pepperdine really because of the vision and that our coach at the time, Andy Lopez, had. And Pepperdine is a small regional school, but his vision was, we're going to win the College World Series. We're going to win the College World Series. And my first year there, I struggled early on in the year. I got hurt, and I ended up leaving after the first year. I went and played for another amazing coach, John Nochi, College of San Mateo, and then transferred to Arizona State, where I had a great career. And but unfortunately, I didn't get drafted again, and so and that's where my sports career ended. LearnIt started, but I would have to attribute the vast majority of my leadership skills and really what I've learned about how to be successful through my playing sports. Sports teaches you a lot about discipline, and I'm not even saying you don't have to play all the way through college or at the level I did, but I think sports in general helps you learn how to be disciplined, teamwork, and really also, of course, resilience, because there's a lot of ups and downs and failures in sports.
Yeah. You also played for a couple legendary coaches, like multiple very successful coaches who had 3 coaches who had taken teams to College World Series. Like what leadership lessons did you learn when you think back and you're writing a book like this from some of those coaches?
It's amazing. As we were talking about beforehand, I just reconnected with Andy Lopez in person for the first time in 30 years. We've spoken over the phone, and even now I love to listen and learn from him. And Coach Lopez had 2 rules: be on time and do the right thing. Those were his rules. And I kind of carry that along. And I talk about that in my book. But I've learned a lot from just the way the other coaches that I had, Jim Brock and Coach Nochi. I've also had some not so good coaches along the way. Doesn't really matter who they were, but they also teach you how not to manage a team. Whether it's taking credit when you don't deserve it, or placing blame. So I've had a wide spectrum and unique opportunity to play for some great coaches, and I've really tried to emulate some of their strengths, because I'm a believer you shouldn't reinvent the wheel. So I just kind of took what I learned and try to emulate a lot of what I've learned from them.
How did you go from that and eventually get into this space? Because I think you even said in your book, if someone told you, back in high school that you would one day be the CEO of a successful learning company, you would have thought they were crazy. So, how did you end up getting into learning in general?
So in general, basically what happened was my entire career was, excuse me, all the way through college, I never had a job. I always played, in the summers, I played in Cape Cod and I traveled all around the world playing. Then all of a sudden, when my sports career ended, I was really fortunate. I came from a family, my father, Walt Lembi, and then my grandfather, we were one of the largest residential real estate companies in California, in San Francisco. And I was fortunate enough to have different opportunities, work opportunities, to either go work for our hotels or the real estate company or even the savings and loan. But Andy, I was, to be honest, I was, pretty scared. I've never worked before. And my dad, who was a great entrepreneur, he passed away in 2010. He came up with a lot of ideas, and one of them was LearnIt. And LearnIt at the time was just kicking off in June of 95. And the idea behind it was he went and took a class somewhere, one of the large franchises, because he was trying to find a way to manage his real estate portfolio, not on paper anymore. And if you go all the way back to 95, it wasn't as digitized as it is today, computerized,
Right.
I guess you'd say. And he took a class, it was full day. He thought it was sterile and boring. And he's like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So like a lot of great entrepreneurs, he's like, called up a guy who used to be the CFO, and he's like, I want to build short, quick, fun classes that are relatively inexpensive, that will really be engaging. And I was just fortunate enough to be finishing up Arizona State, and I went and worked at LearnIt as a receptionist, and spent a couple of years answering phones, and moved up to doing sales and helping out with IT, and even teaching some of our basic Excel classes at the time. And about 5 or 6 years into it, the gentleman who was running LearnIt wasn't working out, and my father was looking to replace him. And I said, hey, give me a shot. I've taught classes, I've answered more phones to this day than anybody. And he's like, you got it, kid. Let's do it. And so I moved into that role there. And that's really how I got into the learning world. And yeah, like you mentioned, I never in my wildest dreams thought I would be in it, but here I am 28 years later, and I still really enjoy it.
Yeah, it's still going strong. And you mentioned, or I mentioned in the introduction, that LearnIt has upskilled more than 1.8 million professionals, which is absolutely huge. And I think of this as a very large, fragmented space of so many different types of providers in learning and development, talent development, training, upskilling, whatever you call it. What would you attribute? I'm sure there's lots of factors, but what are the main things you attribute to the success of LearnIt, that you've been able to grow it, whether it was through your father or previous management or you, that's allowed the company to hire and retain the best people and truly grow and work with so many different companies?
Great question. And part of the reason for 1.8 million is if you look at our YouTube channel, we have, I think, 600,000 right there.
Mm.
But what's really helped us, what's really gotten LearnIt to where we are today, without question, is the level of talent that people that we've been able to attract, retain, and hire. We've been really fortunate over the years to bring in great talent, cultivate great talent, and retain great talent. And that's really what's driven LearnIt over the years. Absolutely.
And how do you find this great? I mean, everyone says like, oh, we need to find great talent. But it doesn't always work out for other companies. You have found and retained great talent, like you said. What have been some keys to that?
So, I mean, I don't have any secret sauces, but if I did, it was to be able to spot great talent and get them to come to LearnIt and put them in the positions to succeed. I think one key, and it's kind of hard if you're just starting out, is most of the hires we bring in, Andy, are through internal referrals. And
Mm.
it's either through individuals who are currently on our team or maybe the LearnIt alumni. We have a large, hundreds and hundreds of employees over the years, and they kind of know what the culture is at LearnIt, and so they have a pretty good idea of who would be a good fit to join the LearnIt team. And how we've been able to retain is, we invest, we're a learning and development company. And so we invest a lot of, time and money on our own team to continue to develop and train our team. It takes a lot of work, but it's also, it's been very rewarding. And I think that that's really what's helped drive our success over the years.
I also got a sense, and I want to get into the content from the book. I got a sense from reading your book that your leadership style is one that is about empowering and enabling people to succeed, like finding the right people and then putting them in a position and actually challenging and trusting them, which is, I believe, what great leaders do. But it's a struggle. There's so many managers out there that have a hard time really trusting their people, and that's how they end up becoming micromanagers, right? And they don't truly empower them to grow and take on bigger and bigger things. And that's when people get frustrated and leave. So I imagine you've taken an approach to try to empower and enable more people to succeed.
100%. Now, that takes practice as well. I can't say that there haven't been times where, you want to jump in and micromanage.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, really what my philosophy on that is, you want to find great people. We look for the key traits we really look for are people who have humility, curiosity, obviously have integrity is super important, and resilience. And once you have those types of people, then point them in a position to be successful, and then give them clear direction, or give their leaders clear direction, and then stand back and let them have at it. And then if they make mistakes, hey, don't worry about it. Let's learn from those mistakes and move forward. But it's the only way to really scale, or I think to really build teams where people feel like that they actually can make a difference, is if you do give them the autonomy to go for the work and do it themselves.
Yeah, that's how people truly grow. Well, I think that's a nice transition into talking about this book, which again is called The LearnItall Leader: Mindset, Traits, and Tools. Why did you write this book? What was the inspiration for it, and what do you want people to do with it?
Oh, thank you. So really, over the years, people have said, "Hey, you have some great stories at LearnIt, and you're a really good storyteller with a diverse, everything from sports, and I even have some rock and roll stories in there." Really, what inspired me to write it, one was I've got two young ones. I got Lucy, who's my daughter, who's 5, and my son Wally, who's 1.5. And they never got an opportunity to meet their grandfather, Walt, who is my best friend and really mentor. So I really wanted them to be able to have something where they could learn about their grandfather and how he really helped. Not only my dad, my mom played a tremendous role too, but learn there. And also, honestly, I just kind of like giving back and taking what I've learned and the successes and mostly the failures, and be able to share that with others who are maybe coming up and want to get into leadership and they're unsure of their talent, or they just need somebody or some book or whatever it is, training to help get them there. So that's pretty much what inspired me to, and my wife pushed me at, which I'm glad she did now. I'm glad she did. I'm glad Kara did. So it was, that's really what inspired me.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we need that help. We need that push from somebody, whether it's a wife. I have a good friend who is has published multiple books now, and he actually has started a whole business around supporting other people with their books. But it all got started because he kept talking about book ideas, and his wife one day said, "Just stop talking about this unless you're actually going to do it."
That's great.
And now he's got a whole business built around it. So, and
awesome.
He always credits her with that. So the book is about the LearnItall leader. What does that mean, and how does that compare to a know-it-all leader?
So really, what I think the difference is, starting off with know-it-all. Now, let's look at it this way. I mean, we've all had our know-it-all moments where we've thought we were sure of ourselves and weren't open to change. What I refer to as LearnItall is, again, somebody who has humility and is really curious and open to learning. What I talk about in my book a lot is, I don't think, you don't need an Ivy League education. Sure, I think that's fantastic. You have one. I know a lot of my friends do, and they're super successful. But I think that, to be a leader, you can evolve into a leader, and you're never really finished. It's just a journey that keeps on going. And so the difference, I think, between a learn-it-all and a know-it-all is somebody who has a beginner's mind and is open to continuing to evolve, where, where you've sat around and maybe you have somebody who's super successful and they're trying to give you advice, and a team of people advice, and one person at the table is like, no, this is how we do it. No, this is how we do it. And you're just losing a great opportunity to learn from others. And that's pretty much what I say about LearnItall is they're open and they're curious and always trying to find things and ways to do things better or different.
Yeah, I always think, when I think about leadership, my own experience, working in the corporate world for many, many years, working with many leaders, being a leader myself, is that I think leadership is about enabling and empowering others. And that there really is such an importance to humility and curiosity to be the great leader that is able to do those things, because you can hire and surround yourself with the best people and then actually empower them to succeed, which we talked about earlier. I think one of the biggest challenges I've noticed, especially as I've been running leadership development workshops for many years in different companies, I notice a lot of people get into a leadership position and they feel pressure to have all the answers. They feel like they need to be the smartest person in the room, not even like for their own ego, but they just feel like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. And that kind of tends more towards trying to become the know-it-all leader. How do you help people understand that it's okay not to have the answers, that really that's what the rest of your team is there for?
I mean, Andy, you're 100% right on track right there. First and foremost, nobody has all the answers. And
Right.
Again, getting back to the LearnItall leader, humility and vulnerability, it's okay to say you don't know. And what's even more important is I've always believed in hiring people that are smarter than me and better. Surround yourself with top talent, and you can learn from them. And I just think that if you're in a leadership position and maybe you're unsure of what your capabilities are, it's just being vulnerable and not being afraid to ask for advice, reach outside of your organization even, and find mentors and coaches that could help help you make it through. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I think it all starts with not being afraid to say, hey, you know what, I don't have an answer to this. Let me figure it out and I can get back to you. I think that if you're a leader, and I have a lot of people that I coach or mentor, and they tell me that they have managers who obviously are know-it-alls, but you could see right through that, and I think it's just much better to be authentic and transparent.
Right. And people
Doesn't
don't
show
like
weakness.
Yeah, and people don't like working for the know-it-all leaders. When I used to run leadership development workshops more often, I would ask people, "Hey, think about the leaders who really multiplied you and helped you succeed more, and and then the leaders that really diminished you and that you hated working for." And ask people to name some of the qualities. And the number one most common thing that people brought up about the manager they didn't like working for was micromanagement. Right? It was the people that are either they knew the right way to do it, like you said, or we've done it this way before, or we can't do it this way, you need to do it exactly my way. They don't really trust their people. It becomes agonizing and frustrating, and that's why people end up throwing their hands up and leaving, because they're like, I'm not growing here, I'm just like under pressure all the time.
Absolutely. I've experienced that. I've seen that. Also, I think some pretty poor managers or leaders are the ones who make the cardinal sin and take credit for what their team members have been able to accomplish. I just think that that's ridiculous. As far as I'm concerned, I don't want any of the credit. Even if it happened to be my idea, I want my team members to be the ones that get credit for that work, because it only inspires them to want to do more, And so, I think that putting yourself in the spotlight for that, at the end of the day, I mean, I think you can motivate your team to get them to do better by giving them the opportunity and the credit for the work.
Oh yeah, and then they're likely going to give you the credit later when they're talking to other people for supporting them and enabling them to do that stuff, right? For being that supportive leader.
I mean, in my experience, a lot of times, a lot of the people that we hire are relatively new to the workforce, but they've got the right attitude and mindset, and then we kind of coach them and mold them into where we want them to go. And at some point, some people I haven't learned it have been with me for 15 years, but I've had a lot of amazing talent who's come through and they've been with us for 3 years and then they've moved on, and they look back and when I run into them, they say, "Hey, you really gave me the opportunity to grow and evolve." And a lot of people wouldn't have given us those opportunities. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, heck yeah. People appreciate it. They remember it forever. I talk about that a lot with
Totally.
people when
Yeah.
it comes to leadership, that, a lot of times we're talking about the know-it-all leaders or leaders that are trying to take the credit, or maybe they don't want to develop their people too much because they're afraid that they're going to move on to other things, or even like, possibly take their job. But what people don't realize is that when you develop your people and allow them to grow well beyond what they're doing now, they remember you forever. And that's
Absolutely.
legacy, right?
Totally. Absolutely. And like you mentioned earlier, if you're one of those leaders who have to jump in and do the work for your team, you're just going to lose them. I mean, they're just going to sit back and say, "Well, we know Damon's going to
Right.
come in and do this, so I'm not even going to attempt." And
Yep.
you're not helping them evolve and grow, and eventually, and especially in a stronger job market than we're in today, they're going to find new work. And people, especially the younger generations, they want an opportunity to learn and grow, to carry on their career.
Yep, absolutely. By the way, just to prove my point about legacy, which I think about as, how you are remembered. When
Hmm.
we started this interview, we talked about some of your baseball career and we talked about coaches as leaders. You named 3 coaches that you played for who helped you succeed in your career. You named them in your book. You talk about them quite often, I assume, and so they are remembered forever. You also said you played for some bad coaches and that you weren't going to name them, and so now
I'm
they
not
are
going to.
essentially forgotten to history, right? You're not naming them because you don't want to give them any credit.
No, but as I mentioned in my book, I'm incredibly fortunate to play for Andy Lopez, Jim Brock, John Nochi, and some other great coaches like my hitting coach, John Pearson, at Arizona State, and my high school coach, John DeVos. But, Andy Lopez, Brock, and Nochi are legends. But they're the bad coaches. I've learned as much from them and probably more on what not to do.
Yeah.
And so, I'm grateful for that. But no, I mean, yeah, it is what it is.
One of the things you cover in your book is something that I have struggled with, and many people struggle with, especially when they get into leadership positions and they don't think they're maybe qualified. Like, oh, I got promoted to this. I don't know if I can actually handle this, which many people refer to as um, imposter syndrome, right? This idea that I'm not really qualified to be in the position that I'm in. And a lot of people feel like, oh, what if they find out that I'm not qualified and we let go? How do you help people deal with imposter syndrome? Remember, you had some great tips in your book that that could be helpful to those that are dealing with that.
Sure. So I experienced imposter syndrome when I got to Pepperdine. In high school, I left high school. I was a high school preseason All-American. I got to Pepperdine. Everybody's super talented, and I kind of wondered to myself, do I belong here? Am I good? Can I compete at this level? And I struggled, and I struggled, and I left, like I mentioned earlier. And it took me until I eventually ended up at Arizona State. And when I got to Arizona State, a lot of people said, before I took the scholarship to Arizona State, they said, "You know what, Damon, if you go to Arizona State, there's going to be 17 other guys trying out for first base. Why don't you go to a D2 school or a local school?" And Andy, what I said to myself is, "You know what? Screw it. This is my last opportunity. I'm going to go in and I'm going to give it my best shot." And what a tremendous learning experience that was for me. And so how I've always dealt with imposter syndrome and recommend it to others is really 3 steps. One is hard work. I'm not saying that you need to work, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, but you need to put in the effort. In sports, it's repetition. And if you're in sales and you need to prospect, it's making calls. And if you want to get better at doing podcasts, you got to be on a lot of podcasts. You got to put in the effort. Number 2 for me is really focus. If you have imposter, sometimes it's easy to stray away from what your fear is or what's going on. And you just got to attack it, focus on what you're trying to work through. And 3 is learning. Use it all as a learning opportunity. Learn from your mistakes and ask questions, but also don't take yourself too seriously. If things fall apart, I mean, at the end of the day, I call it purposely awfulizing. Like, what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst thing that could happen? If I go on a if I take this new job and things don't work out, then maybe I get demoted or I lose my job. I'll get another job. And it's with sports. If I go play at Arizona State and unfortunately it doesn't work out, then life goes on. So that's really my approach to how I recommend dealing with imposter syndrome.
And I think when you do, I agree with that. And I think when you go to the worst case, you have to ask yourself, like, what's realistically the worst case, right? Because a lot of times people go in their minds, well, people are going to find out I'm not good at this. I'm going to be fired, and somehow I'm going to be out on the street, homeless because I couldn't do this one job. And it's like, well, actually, you have great skills that got you to this point. You probably could get another job, right? You'll find other opportunities, and maybe even you need a failure in order to get you to the next things. I mean, we've all had those. The other thing that I often recommend for people that has worked for me too, when it comes to overcoming imposter syndrome, is listen to the other people who are propping you up, who are complimenting you, who are telling you you're good at things. If you were offered a job doing something or a scholarship playing D1 baseball, there's a reason for that, right? They see potential in you. They think that you're going to be really good at it. So even if you don't believe in yourself, other people believe in you. Obviously, like you talk about in your book, it's important to believe in yourself as well. But sometimes you need to borrow other people's belief and confidence, I think, to boost up your own.
I mean, you just teed it up for me right there. Really, I talked about this in my book when I went in for at Pepperdine. When I went in for my first one-on-one with Coach Andy Lopez, halfway through the fall season, he sat me down and he said, "Damon, I think we made a big mistake. When we recruited you, I thought you would be a power hitting third baseman and a potential major league, potential. And unfortunately, that's not the case. And so, I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, how do I get the next plane flight home to get out of here?
Let me get out of here.
Let me get out of here. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was in shock. And he literally sat there for 5 seconds. And then he said, you know what? That's what you think of yourself. And that's why you're struggling right now. He said, you have great potential. You can be a Division I star, but it all needs to start with you. You need to believe in yourself and your own talent, because if you don't, then nobody else is going to be able to. And so it all comes down to, I guess, the right mentality and having the self-belief and self-confidence that you're capable, or that not even that you're capable, that you've earned where you're at, that you've earned where you're at and deserve to be there.
Sometimes we get these opportunities and we don't think maybe I'm not qualified, but other people believe in us. I strongly believe with a growth mindset, we got to give these things a shot. We were talking about that a little bit before we started recording. You had a model, I guess, in the book that you mentioned, Sir Richard Branson's "screw it, let's do it" decision-making approach. And when is that appropriate?
Well, there are times that's appropriate, and there's times that that's not appropriate. I mean, it's appropriate if it's a situation that you make a decision and it's something you can recover from. So when it's not appropriate is if you're putting your business on the line or your career on the line. So screw it, let's do it. It's if the risk is something that, if you, let's say an opportunity comes to you, and the client wants, something that's maybe a little outside of what you are capable of doing, but you believe that you're able to, meet or exceed their expectations, then you can say, like I just said right there, screw it, let's do it. We can move forward with this.
Yep.
But if you're looking at acquiring a business, or taking on new real estate for your business, whatever it is, and that it's going to be something that have a huge burden on you, then that's probably not you need to really be a lot more thoughtful in your decision making.
Right. Yeah. Jeff Bezos from Amazon, the founder of Amazon, famously talks about
70%.
having 2 types of decisions, right? The type 1 and type 2. The type 1 is you walk through the door, you can go back. You need to make those decisions more quickly. And if it's one where you really can't ever go back, then that's when you take your time. But the problem is, he says most businesses treat a lot of type 1 decisions as if they're type 2 and spend way too much time on them.
Yes, and Jeff, you're correct. And Jeff Bezos also says that if you have 70% of the facts, then you should be ready to make the decision. A lot of times I've seen this where, let's say you're looking to hire a new COO and you have 70%, or quite a bit that you got the right fit. But if you keep going, more interviews, more references, more background checks, not more background checks, but more assessments, then you might miss out on that woman might take the job someplace else. So
yes, right.
Bezos is right around the walking through the door or not, but you also can't have decision paralysis where you're just afraid to pull the trigger.
Right. You got to just do stuff, right? Which he's
Yep.
he's done a lot of, right? Built a huge company. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about building a culture of learning and development, something I know we are big on. Many of our listeners work in talent development, learning and development, are big on this idea of learning and development. Some struggle to get the leadership on board in their companies with this idea of investing in learning and development, even when things maybe not going that well. Could you talk about how implementing a culture of continuous learning and professional development helps attract and retain people and leads to more business success?
Yeah. Well, I would say even in a economy, even in a downturn, in a recession, where companies are doing layoffs, I think it's critical to do to invest in your team, to continue to upskill them. For one, if you go through and you lay off 10% of your workforce, it doesn't mean that those jobs go away, those tasks go away. So you need to take the team that you have and be able to reskill them and help develop them to be able to continue to evolve your business. And number two with that is motivating your team. These people, you still have your team. You got to feel like they want to feel like they're being invested in and for growth. So I think in that situation, investing in professional development is important. In general, a lot of the customers that we have, and I'm sure, Andy, you see as well, a lot of times people come back with their their company culture assessment or whatever internal, anonymous survey they do, that the individuals or the team members, they want more training and personal development opportunities. And so investing in training in your team and learning and coaching and whatever it is you're going to do, it pays dividends, because turnover and attrition is expensive.
Yeah.
If you lose good talent, there's no guarantee that you bring somebody else in, they look good on paper, they may not even be a culture fit. So I've always believed that if a company is dealing with attrition, a lot of it is the root problem is you're just not investing the right way with your employees, especially starting right off at onboarding. I think it's critical to get going at the onboarding phase as you bring people in.
Yeah, it starts from the moment you make that offer, right? Even before that, and creating that employee experience, that life cycle that people go through all the way to potentially the end. And it's so important. And you mentioned like that being the thing that people want. I think there was a McKinsey study last year that I've cited in the past that shows that the number one reason people are leaving companies now is lack of perceived career growth, where they don't feel like they can grow in that company, whether that's learning or it's actually like some type of promotion or moving into different roles. And I've heard time and time again, talking with colleagues in talent development, when they do engagement surveys, the number one thing people will say they want is more career development, more career growth, more learning and development. Even if they don't think they necessarily have time, that's the thing they want. And so if you're not giving it to them, then, you're going to be facing, potential consequences from that.
Yeah, I agree. And, yes, not enough potential for growth. And as we've all heard, they also leave because of poor managers.
Sure.
And that's typically because the managers aren't going to allow them to carve out time to learn, right? And we like to call it learning time. Give people, you have PTO time, but you also have, learning time where they can carve out specific hours during their week to be able to, we do mostly at LearnIt virtual instructor-led training, but I also like to provide resources through even some of our competitors or on demand. But allowing your employees the space and time to dedicate to learning and their personal and professional growth is, I think, key.
Yeah. We've got to wrap this interview up, Damon. Is there anything from the book that we didn't talk about that you want to make sure people understand about the importance of becoming a LearnItall leader or supporting your people in becoming LearnItall leaders?
I think one thing that in my book we didn't talk about that I think people have enjoyed is I talk a little bit about the trust tax and as a leader. And what I mean by that is that when you bring people on, it's kind of like you give them the opportunity to grow and evolve. And, sometimes people, let you down, and maybe they leave or they take whatever the situation is. And people have always been to me like, how do you, that doesn't upset you and you just keep moving on. And my approach to that, Andy, as a leader is, you want to, it's much better to spend your effort on being positive and focusing on, and every once in a while, things won't go the way you want them to go with particular employees or team members, but it's okay. I think it's much better to focus on the positive with your team, and more likely than not, they'll surprise you, and not surprise you, but they'll do a great job, and they'll be part of your, in our case, our LearnIt community or alumni forever.
Yeah, absolutely. And you want to keep build that relationship that will last us forever, even if they're not there anymore, like you said, because they refer people, whatever it may be. There's so many long-term ramifications from those relationships. You never know what might come down the line. So that trust, empowering, enabling people, building those teams where people feel engaged and they feel like they can grow, and that learning and development culture we talked about. Damon, this has been really great. I like I said, I've already been enjoying the book. I think there's a lot of great stories and nuggets in there that people can take away, can learn from. I know the book's going to be available on your website, on Amazon. If people want to get in touch with you or talk more about the things that LearnIt provides, what's the best place for them to go?
Well, you can go to our website, learnit.com, or you could find me on LinkedIn, Damon Lembi on LinkedIn. And yeah, sure. My book's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the regular places.
It's out there. We'll put a link in the show notes,
Thanks,
learnit.com. We'll put a link in the show notes to the book. And I know you guys have a really popular YouTube channel with a lot of great content on there as well that people can find. So thanks again for being here, Damon. I really enjoyed it. Look forward to talking with you more soon.
Thanks. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks, Andy.